Welcome today to our HR Learns webinar with attorney Jonathan Segal. Is that right? Segal? Segal?
You got it.
Segal. Like the bird, a seagull. Anyway, I should ask these questions before we go live. Anyway,
All good,
I
Suzanne.
I'm Suzanne Lucas, and I am the co-founder of HR Learns. Our other co-founder, Victoria Purser, is getting stitches right now, which, boys and girls, is why we wear shoes when we go outside. So she is getting stitches at the moment. Because we should wear shoes when we go outside. Anyway, we're super happy to have you today. We're thrilled to have Jonathan here with us to talk about when bias crosses the line, how to recognize and respond to anti-Semitism at work. And just today, as I'm scrolling through my social media feed, I saw a lawsuit I wasn't aware of before at MIT involving a Jewish employee who was fired because all of the coworkers said they refused to work with him because he was Jewish. And of course, that's the claim. We always say when the lawsuit comes out, that's the claim. We don't know what really happened. That'll be sorted later. But it's something definitely in the news all of the time and something we need to be aware of. So I'm going to give a quick bio of our speaker. Jonathan A. Segal is a partner at Duane Morris LLP in the Employment, Labor Benefits, and Immigration Practice Group. He's also the founder and managing principal of the Duane Morris Institute. The Duane Morris Institute provides training for human resource professionals, in-house counsel, benefits administration, and managers at Duane Morris at client sites and by way of webinar on myriad employment law, benefits, and immigration matters. Previously a litigator, Jonathan's practice now focuses almost entirely on assisting employers meet their business objective by maximizing legal compliance and managing legal risk with an eye on culture. Jonathan is also the legislative director for the Pennsylvania State Council of SHRM. And as a former Pennsylvanian, I'm like, woohoo! He lives in Pennsylvania. I lived in Pennsylvania once upon a time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, so throw your questions, comments into the chat, and there we go. Jonathan, it is all you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Very much appreciate the opportunity to talk about anti-Semitism, especially with someone like you. You have my respect and appreciation for all you contribute online and otherwise. And thank you all for joining. We're going to cover in the next hour what could be 3 hours worth of material. If there are questions you have afterward, but to do that, I'm going to just make some references. I'll stay on it. If you have specific areas where you want more information, I'm happy to provide it. We're dealing with, if you will, an explosion of anti-Semitism. According to the Anti-Defamation League, which fights anti-Semitism, 2020, they've been keeping track of anti-Semitic incidents for 46 years. 2024 broke the 2023 record, and 2025 will break the 2024 record. Examples of harassment, violence, assaults, and even murder. According to the FBI, 15% of all hate crimes, not just religious hate crimes, 15% of all hate crimes are directed at Jews because they're Jews. So says the FBI. And Jews account for less than or approximately 2% of the population. So sometimes we talk about representation. Jews are overrepresented in harassment, violence, assaults, and even murder. And we're going to talk about what does this all mean in terms of the workplace. But we hear a lot about what happens out there, how that affects individuals when they come to work. I want to mention for this program, I think probably relevant. I'm a Jewish guy, and some of what I talk about is going to be personal experiences and personal observations. I don't think I will be I will do my best to be objective. When I'm being subjective, I'm going to do my best to share that. So we've seen an explosion of anti-Semitism, but what does it really mean? Well, it's words that are familiar to us, prejudice, discrimination, harassment, violence, or hostility toward the Jewish religion and or the Jewish people. Historic anti-Semitism was, well, Jews did not accept did not accept Christ, did not follow Islam. Um, and that was in the older days, the Middle Ages, etc. Over the last couple hundred years, it's been more about hostility toward the Jewish people as a people. When you go back to Nazi Germany, it was less about the religion and more with this conspiracy theory that Jews allegedly are less than, but somehow responsible for running the world in ways that are harmful to others or designed to benefit the Jews.
Hey,
Brett
Jonathan,
Stevens,
you
yes,
want to put your slides in slideshow mode?
they're not in slideshow mode.
No,
You can't see them.
I can see them, but I can see your whole screen and like all the editing tools. So if you want to switch them into slideshow mode, and I don't know if you've been meaning to advance because they haven't been advancing. If you haven't been meaning to
I
advance, that's
don't know
fine.
how to. Thank you for raising this. I don't know how to get this out of this mode. Show,
Up in the top left hand corner, there says start slideshow.
right? You are sharing today. Start slideshow. I see
Yeah.
show webinar, remote control. You see the notes too?
Um, I don't see any notes, but you're on their sheet, cover slide. Is why I see the cover slide. Is that where you
Okay.
tend to be?
Do you see now slide 2? What is anti-Semitism?
Nope. I see when bias crosses the line, how to recognize and respond to
Okay, hold
anti-Semitism.
on. Let me try one more time. I'm sorry, folks. I think I think I do better at substance than I do with figuring out how to attach this. I am very embarrassed. Um, do you see any?
Moment.
Now I am sharing.
All right. I see just it's the cover slide. And let me try
How
this.
about now?
Still the cover slide.
Okay, I'm not sure what's going on. Let me try. I apologize, my friends. I'm gonna have to make up time on this, and I promise I will. Um,
No worries. We'll figure it out.
how about now?
Aha, now that looks perfect. I see explosion of anti-Semitism.
Okay.
Yes. Woo! Okay.
Apologies, folks. So we see an explosion of anti-Semitism more than ever before, highest levels since the Holocaust, where 6 out of 9 million European Jews were killed. The German prime minister or chancellor cried at how much anti-Semitism he sees there. Have heard that all over Europe, not just horrified by, but sad about the recrudescence of anti-Semitism. And historically, it was about people of the faith of being Jewish. It then began to shift more toward this conspiracy theory, as I mentioned, by Brett Stevens talks about punching up. Brett Stevens, formerly of the Journal, now the New York Times, the idea that Jews were less than, but somehow controlling the world. Writer whom I love, Douglas Murray, says it's a shape-shifting virus. And in the 2020s, it shifted again. What about anti-Zionism or anti-Israeli bias? 58% of the incidents reported in 2024 were Israel related, and the same has only intensified in 2025. If you think of the spring of 2025, there were three very high-profile cases in where there was an attempted assassination of the Pennsylvania governor, setting his residence on fire, timing Passover, and then comments made about, and we'll talk about this, Palestine and Gaza in the discussion of why he did what he did. An interfaith couple was murdered, leaving the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., say their names, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah and Milgram, And again, I want to emphasize that they were the person that killed them talked about that person's belief of what Israel was doing wrong relative to Gaza and Palestinian rights. I also want to mention anti-Semitism harms not only Jews. Yaron Lashinsky was not Jewish. For me, I'll never forget the first time I dealt with anti-Semitism as a little kid. We were moving into a neighborhood, and I guess it was unlawfully zoned as Jewish. When we moved in, carved into our house was the word Jews. Our neighbors also had the word Jews carved into their house, and they were Christian. So anti-Semitism as a virus can affect not only Jews, but also others. And then the setting on fire of Jewish protesters peacefully calling for the release of Israeli hostages by Hamas. Um, this one I have to acknowledge really hit me hard. My great grandfather, we believe, was set on fire by the Nazis for the crime of being Jewish. Most of my family died in the Holocaust. I give these three examples, but there are literally hundreds where individuals have been attacked or worse, killed uh, with a where the wrongdoer referenced the Middle East, an attack of an older Jewish man on the Upper East Side of New York, where someone yelled "Free Palestine." An individual was, threw a brick through a window of a grocery in Brookline and yelled "Free Palestine." A Massachusetts auto shop in Long Island torched with an arson attack with the message "Long live the Intifada, free Palestine." Now, why do I mention that? Like, I want to be crystal clear and say this with emphasis. Advocating for the Palestinian rights is not anti-Semitism. Criticism of the Israeli government is not in of itself anti-Semitism. I am strongly Jewish. I am have very little tolerance for anti-Semitism, and I am often critical of the Israeli government. That does not make one anti-Semitic. When does it become anti-Semitic? It can become anti-Semitic when criticism of Israel morphs into anti-Semitism when Jews writ large are blamed and much worse for actual and or perceived wrongs of the Israeli government. Um, and we don't have to get whether it's actual or perceived. When there is a perception that Israel has done wrong and Jews outside the country are attacked for that, or will come about in the moment of the workplace discriminated on based on that, that becomes anti-Semitism. But Suzanne, I'm a free speech guy, so I also want to mention I believe that it's important to say criticism, I want to repeat it, of Israel is not in of itself anti-Semitism. But when you start attacking someone because they're Jewish, in light of concerns you have about Israel, that is one form of anti-Semitism. So I hope it's not with hubris, but I've developed my own working definition of anti-Semitism relative to the workplace. It's prejudice, hostility, discrimination, harassment, and violence towards someone, Jewish because of their faith. Um, don't want someone working here who's an Orthodox Jew. That orthodoxy is, and I won't fill in the word, against the Jewish people as a people. Don't trust him. And I want to mention, real relevant to potential liability, Judaism is an ethno-religion. Many Jews are not all that observant. Some are atheists. Many never go to a synagogue, yet they would define themselves as very connected to and proud of being Jewish. And I need to just share this part. I kind of fall into one of those people, although I will go to synagogue at times. My connection is to the ethnicity, to the history, to the roots. This is relevant to liability. This is relevant, more importantly, to what we see and how we respond to it. And then prejudice against people because of their actual or perceived connections to Israel. Um, I so appreciate what Suzanne said about, yes, this is in a complaint, it's worth raising. But as a defense lawyer, I always know there's another side. I don't know what the other side is in the MIT case, but the individual that applied for a job and was said, I don't know if you would be comfortable working here. And the person said, well, what do you mean I might not be comfortable? They said, well, we're not sure that you'll be comfortable working here. We feel very strongly that Israel is, and I won't complete the words. The employee allegedly, these are all allegations, said, well, how do you know how I feel about the Middle East? And then it became a litmus test on the Middle East. But these are just some examples. I'm going to give you some greater clarity in a moment. You all folks know that if someone's racist, they don't check the racism at the door, at least usually not. If someone's sexist, they don't check their sexism at the workplace door, at least usually not. We do the same thing with homophobia and ageism. The same is true with anti-Semitism. So, what I'd like to talk about, we could talk about discrimination, harassment, segregation, failure to accommodate, or retaliation. In the interest of time, I'd like to talk about discrimination and harassment as the primary areas. So, a Jewish applicant or employee may be protected based on their religion, as I already noted, even if they're secular. So, discriminating against someone Jewish who doesn't go to synagogue and may not even believe in God still could be a violation of Title VII and or applicable state or local laws. It also can be a violation of Title VII with regard to national origin. That's why I spent some time saying being Jewish, and I think it's very similar to Muslim, can be an ethno religion. Just as an aside, when we hear about what goes on in colleges and universities, um, Title VI applies. And for colleges and universities under Title VI, there's no protection for religion. Kind of a surprise. But anti Semitic harassment is covered under national origin under Title VI. It can be covered with regard to Jewish applicants, employees under religion, national origin, even some cases saying race or genetic information, but broad legal protection. Historically, there has not been a lot of legal claims brought by Jewish applicants or employees. Um, I think one reason is historically there's not been a lot of discrimination against Jewish applicants and employees. But sadly, what we see sometimes online is now more common in workplaces. The acting chair of the EOC, Andrea Lucas, has made clear that one of her top priorities is combating anti Semitism in the workplace. And she just announced a 20, I think it was 21 million, I should correct that, settlement by a prestigious university for tolerating religious harassment of Jewish employees. Now, the university didn't admit that they did it, but a $21 million settlement, the largest in almost 30 years. In response to that, Lucas posted on LinkedIn, here at the EOC, we're serious about combating anti Semitism, and we're just getting started. So, as HR folks, as you folks who learn from HR Learns and hopefully work with them as well, what does this mean for us? In terms of discrimination, the Anti-Defamation League did a really interesting study, and they asked people, um, do you agree with any of the following tropes? And there were 9. I'm going to go through 3. 38% were willing to admit, my guess is the number is higher beyond what, because I don't think people want to admit bias. Jews like to be the head of things. 26% said Jews have too much power in the business world. And 23% said that Jews are more willing than others to use shady practices to get what they want. I don't think most people in their workplaces walk around and say those things, but those feelings are reflected in an anonymous surveys where individuals could say how they actually feel. When I look at surveys on race, I assume the numbers are higher. When I look at surveys on sex, I assume the numbers are higher. I assume the numbers are a little bit higher here. One factor that's particularly disconcerting to me is that when you look at admissions of bias, race, sex, sexual orientation, the younger individuals are, the less admitted bias there is. Older individuals, the older people are, the more likely in these other areas they are to buy into tropes. Here, there's a bit of an irony and a scary one that younger folks are more likely to buy into these tropes about Jews than older folks at a time when they are more resistant to tropes based on race, sex, etc. An important education issue, I think, that raises. So, with that little bit of background, just one slide from the ADL, there are 5 kinds of discrimination against Jews that I think we need to think about beyond the obvious one. Oh my goodness, I hate them. The same way someone could say, I hate any other group. And if you don't think that happens, just take a little swim in social media. But one is the stereotyping. I never forgot, Suzanne, when a potential client called me and they said, we have a case, it's going to be a tough one, we'd like you to handle it. And I thought, that's flattering. And they said, we're looking for a Jewish lawyer. Do you know what I mean? I said, I know what you mean. I'm Jewish and I'm a lawyer, but I'm not going to be your lawyer. What they basically told me was they were looking for someone, they didn't say shady practices, but they were talking about fighting dirty, not getting caught in the rules. And I thought, I don't see most things as anti-Semitic. That felt problematic to me based on a stereotype.
Yeah, that
So
was
we have to
sketchy
be,
for sure.
for sure.
For sure, it was sketchy.
And then I worry sometimes in organizations, the idea of fairness is fine, but representation, some DEI programs, notwithstanding the clarity of the law and the strength of enforcement, still saying we want to represent the country we serve or the work or the clients we serve, that kind of representation. Well, Jews may be overrepresented, Asians may be overrepresented. That can't be a reason to discriminate against them. But look at the ADL. Jews have too much power in the business world. So if you are someone in a DEI initiative and you're looking at whether or not you're going to hire someone, um, the person who was told, and I saw the email, love to hire you, but we have too many Cohens. His last name wasn't Cohen, a not so subtle code for a Jewish name. To be thoughtful in our DEI programs, we don't discriminate in general, full stop, illegal, wrong. Take a look at overrepresentation. We saw discrimination by some universities against Asian Americans in a way similar to how it was done against Jewish Americans. That same risk could apply in a workplace. Connection or actual perceived to Zionism. An organization that said, I don't know if I want someone who is a Zionist working here. Well, what made that person a Zionist? Well, 90% of Jews of a certain age or older would say the fact that Israel exists, the right of it exists, is important to me. That's what Zionism means. Um, these kinds of conversations take place. Often, I hope not. Have I been made aware of some? Yes. So if someone says, I'm just not comfortable having a Zionist in the workplace, in 2025, in contemporary anti-Semitism, Zionist is a proxy for Jew. So why do I mention all that? Suzanne may know, I think knows this, and I'm honored to give a couple talks for SHRM going forward on this. I got a passion for religious freedom, and it's not just about anti-Semitism. It's about they're not eradicating bias against Christians, against Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, etc. One of the things I notice and I worry about is that compliance training talks about race, talks about sex, talks about sexual orientation, but it's often, not always, silent on religion. The bad news is that anti-Semitism is flourishing. The good news, if I can use that term, and please don't take it out of context, is that it provides an opportunity for organizations to correct to the extent they have not included discrimination relative to religion in their training. You can include in 15 minutes a discussion of religion in your compliance training. And these examples that I gave with minor tweaks can apply to Christians, particularly, for example, stereotyping, blatant animus with regard to Muslims, etc. Think about whether you have a gap in your training. That gap means people may assume you didn't talk about it, it's okay. That gap has an evidentiary value against you in litigation. In After the beyond tragic attack in 9/11, my view is most Americans and most people around the world responded well, didn't blame people, but there were some that made it anti-Muslim. President Bush at the time made clear our response would not be, could not be, should not be anti-Muslim. It should be anti the attackers. When I was doing training in that time, I focused on Islamophobia. I didn't talk about anti-Semitism because, if you will, the Muslim house was on fire. Right now, the Jewish house is on fire. So there might be a reason in your training on religion generally to say, I want to spend a few moments specifically on anti-Semitism because right now, thankfully, we don't see other groups being subject to the same kind in terms of severity or pervasiveness of harassment. So takeaway number one, look at your compliance training. Does it cover religion? If not, fill the gap. Should you call out specifically anti-Semitism? I think so. Should you call that out only? I think not. Folks in DEI, if you're doing training on tons of issues and you're dealing with racial barriers, and you're talking about belonging, etc., gender, and you're silent on anti-Semitism, trust me, I'm getting the calls about your silence. Is that discriminatory? Maybe not. Is that a cultural problem? We're going to come back to that later. I want to turn to harassment, but Suzanne, are there any comments or questions you want to throw in before I jump to the
I
next
have
topic?
I have not seen any questions. So if you guys do have questions, make sure you throw them into the chat and then I'll read them out to Jonathan. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat.
Okay, and folks, I apologize again for um, being a little unteachable when it comes to sharing documents. Thank you, Suzanne, for helping me. I apologize that I got it wrong at the beginning.
It's
We
we
know
use
under
400
federal,
different programs and so yeah, it's different every time.
yep, I'll take it. I'll take it, Suzanne. So let's talk a little bit about harassment. Under the law, it generally needs to be severe or pervasive. So one comment, one joke in quotes usually is not enough. The EOC has made clear quite correctly that things that are very severe, like the N word, may be enough, only even if it's only once, particularly told by a supervisor. What I've done is I have pulled together. Let me just make sure I have the list. I started out, Suzanne, with 16 categories of conduct that I had seen, either from cases, my own practice, or in social media. But in the interest of time, I cut it down to 9. Calling for the death of or violence against the Jews. I've never seen that in a workplace, but I have seen it in social media, and it's not only by bots. Now, if John Doe works in your workplace and he posts on X, formerly known as Twitter, kill all the Jews, I would hope there wouldn't be a lot of discussion. That would seem to me to be objectively unacceptable. And then the question would become, what do you do in response to it? And we'll come back to that in a moment. What if it says, I don't hate Jews, I just hate, this came out in a very public way in the US, Israeli Jews. Well, now you're getting into national origin discrimination. What if it is kill all the Zionists? Well, not all women are feminists, but if you said kill all the feminists, it would probably be a problem, probably meaning it would be. If you said kill all the Zionists, you're talking about most Jews and many evangelical Christians. I'm a little old fashioned. If it starts out with kill all the, um, hard for me. I am sure there's an ending that someone will tell me would be okay. Convicted pedophiles. I'm trying to acknowledge that. But when it's talking about a people, never okay. Hate words such as the K word, some of you may not know what that means, um, rhymes with bike. And I just want to give you a bit of the background. My grandparents were like two of my favorite people in the entire world. And I loved connecting with them. I loved everything about them. I have their pictures behind me. They spoke Yiddish. So I wanted to learn a little Yiddish in order to speak with them. Suzanne, when I was in Switzerland, when I've been in Germany, I can get by on the Yiddish, which sounds like bastardized German. And it's really bad because I only could speak first person. I mean, current tense. But the word keikel means circle. And that horrible word within it was what some of the German Jews were calling the Russian Jews, the people wearing the circles on Ellis Island. They didn't know what to call them. They had a cross, they had an X put on them. It looked like a cross, so some put circles on it. The word kikels was used intergroup, shortened as a discriminatory term. I'm not going to say it's as bad as the N word. I'm not into oppression Olympics to say which hate word is worst. Pretty hateful, like a swastika, pretty hateful. If someone used the N word about or affecting the workplace, I would terminate. I think the K word, the same, the swastika. You might say in 2025, you're not going to see swastikas in workplaces. I never thought I would be seeing nooses in 2025. I'm still seeing them. Unfortunately, that's the case with swastikas. Stereotypic comments about the Jews. This is the one that is the only one I've personally experienced in business settings where, um, I'm just going to give you an example, and I believe in grace, and I'm going to talk about grace in a moment, where someone said, I saw you were giving a talk on anti-Semitism. I said, I am. And they said, that's not really a problem, is it? Thought, not the best way to open the conversation, but I'll give them. I said, yeah, it's become a problem. They said, that surprises me in light of the fact that Jews control most workplaces. And those were not the exact words, but that was the message. That kind of stereotypical comment about Jewish control of the media, Jewish control of banks, um, the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, whether you are left, right, or in between, assassinating someone for their beliefs is just wrong. On that one, I will not budge. Um, and yet I saw in some, there's now the beginning of this was orchestrated by the Jews. Again, this conspiracy, cabal of Jews. And I'm thinking to myself, and it's not always as obvious as the Jews did it. It's the comment made to an employee in a workplace as reported to me. Someone said, do you think this has anything to do with his position on Israel? Now, ironically, and again, good faith, people of good faith, different views, was very supportive of Israel. So why would all of a sudden that come out? Um, to quote Bret Stephens again, yes, you can tell I'm a fan. People who will believe any conspiracy will believe anything about the Jews. And sometimes in conspiracies, even on the tragic retelling of 9/11, no Jews were killed and the Jews were responsible. Many Jews were killed and the Jews were not responsible. So those kind of stereotypic comments um, about including the conspiratorial jokes about Jews. Oh, she's a high maintenance Jap um, in a text message. Not sure we should hire her. What made someone conclude that she was a Jap, Jewish American princess, and what made them conclude that she was high maintenance, that she dressed well? This one blew me away that an employee was referred to as little Annie Frank. Um, Anne Frank, referring to an employee in her workplace as Anne Frank and making jokes to her about needing to hide in the attic. There's going to be litigation. There's more than one of them. I'm giving you these examples, and I'm going to say something in a moment that's really important. And I hope it's okay. I'm sharing some personal history, Suzanne, because I like to fill in some of the maybe how people see these things.
Absolutely.
Most of my family, I had four grandparents. Three of the four lost virtually their entire families in the Holocaust. And um, my great aunt, and there's a story about her I want to tell. My great aunt went to her family and said, I won't die with you. I will live with you. Let's run. They said, we can't believe what we hear. They were gassed alive in camps. When I look at some of these examples, it's hard for me to believe in 2025 that people would do this. It's hard for me to believe in 2025 that someone would call a woman who happens to be a boss the C word, or that there would be a noose at the desk of an African American. But just because you can't imagine doing it doesn't mean that it isn't potentially being done. So when you do your training, and you're going to see this as the next recommendation on harassment, if it has no nexus to or connection with anti-Semitism, that is a gap that is problematic, both in terms of deterring the conduct and equally important, it can be your defense that we provide a complaint procedure. The person never complained, we provide training. Those defenses are being challenged by groups saying, but you never covered anti-Semitism. And again, I share the personal because I understand not believing it could be true because you can't imagine doing it. That's a dangerous road to go down. I do want to just share one more thing about my family because this is very important to how I look at these issues. My great aunt, her family was killed. My great uncle, the same, saw his wife and daughter shot in the head. They met in a displaced person camp. They came to the US, and their daughter, Janie, my cousin, one of my dearest friends, looked to adopt a child. What I didn't tell you was that my Aunt Ruth was saved by a Catholic church in Poland at great risk to everyone in that church, including the priests, including the nuns, including others. There are a lot of allies, a lot of people who, but for what they did, the term used in Israel, righteous Gentile, um, so many more would have died, including in my family. When my cousin wanted to adopt, she went back to the church that saved her mom and adopted two children who were abandoned. I mention that because notwithstanding the topic we're on, I'm not in the same world, obviously, or caliber of person as an Anne Frank, but like Anne Frank, I believe most people are good. And I believe in this area too, that if we all are a little more vocal when we hear the joke about the Jewish doctor, when we hear the comment about, oh my God, the Jewish power, if we say something in the response, that offends me. You don't need to be Jewish to say it. In fact, it's sometimes even more effective if you're not. I want to deal with the moment, the issue of Israel Palestine. And I want to go back again on, I want to go back again and make clear number one, criticism of Israel. If I'm repeating it 3 times, it's really important to me that I make this clear, is not anti Semitic. But blaming all Jews for actual or perceived wrongs by the Israeli government is quintessential anti Semitism. And in terms of the violence that is going on in the streets of the US and other streets, that is often the case. Some of what has happened on college campuses, protest is good. Physically hurting people, blocking access, students unable to study, Jews, Christians, and others, because libraries were blocked. Um, that was anti Semitic. Again, didn't only affect Jewish people because they weren't deciding, some were not allowed in and some were. The easy example is the employer that says, I don't want a Zionist work for me. How could this happen in a workplace? Let me give you some real examples. Jewish employee comes into work, and virtually every day there's an article left on her desk about the actual and or perceived, my perception, actual atrocities in Gaza. One can hold 2 thoughts: Israel's right to defend itself and be unhappy how it's playing out. Um, why was he met with that why was she met with that almost every day? Another case, these are all allegations and charges that may end up in litigation. The employee came to work and Free Palestine was written on his locker. He was Jewish. Why was that statement there? We're going to come back to these in a moment. The employee that went to work and was in a meeting and said, well, surely you can't defend Netanyahu anymore. Confronted in front of an entire team, the employee said, well, I've never defended him before. And why are you asking me and no one else? So this sort of singling out, blaming Jews. This is what I see as the issue most likely to happen. And it can result not only in harassment, but social exclusion. And I'm going to share one example. And I'm not a lover. I have to admit, I'm not a lover of the word privileged and non-privileged. It's too often associated with someone's characteristics and not with their life. But I'm going to talk about my life. I've had a good life. Not ready to end it, but I've had a good life, and I feel I've had a lot of privileges. I haven't dealt with a lot of discrimination that I know of, and if I know of it, it's run off my back. But I remember I was excluded, not at work, but from a business thing, and I said I was a little surprised I wasn't included, and I don't have FOMO, fear of missing out. I have a little too much inclusion sometimes. And I asked the question, was there any reason I wasn't included? Did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? And they said, well, we have very strong feelings about the Middle East and didn't think you would be comfortable there. Some men have avoided women for fear of offending them. Some folks are avoiding Christians that are theologically conservative for fear of offending them. The same thing I see here. So an employee comes to work and posts a Free Palestine sign. And then the $1 million question is, what does the employee do? This is, I believe, a political movement. We have religious issues on all sides of it. Um, but it is a political movement, Free Palestine. Many, and you can just look at the award shows, the individuals saying it, sharing about it, advocating for it, are not Palestinian. And that's in a workplace. I'd like to tell you my reaction to it, but more importantly, I'd like to hear your reaction to my reaction. I've heard some say it's a symbol of solidarity with the Palestinians. So therefore, you got to live with it. I've heard some say, going back to the beginning of our program, it's been used so often, the expression, in connection with attacks on and murder of Jews, that it's a hostile message. It needs to come down. I am not prepared to go with either extreme view. This is my view. We talked about a little while ago the Confederate flag, a whole series of cases in which people argued the Confederate flag in the workplace was a symbol of racism. And those who had it said, no, 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 it's Southern pride. The EOC called it the hatred heritage controversy. I saw it this way. I'm going to assume good intent. I'm going to accept bad impact. I'm going to follow EOC guidelines and say where the conduct is objectively offensive, I'll look at the perspective of a reasonable person of a complainant's protected group. When I've been met with employees posting and others complaining about Free Palestine, I go back to the Confederate flag and I say, like the flag, it may be intended for something positive, advocating for the Palestinian people. It reasonably, from an objective standpoint, could be heard as, given the current context, hostility toward Jews or Israel, the right of Israel to exist. It's just a footnote. When people say, I have nothing against Jews, I just don't think Israel should exist, it sort of sounds like I have nothing against the French, but no France, nothing against the Spanish, but no Spain. If you don't think Israel should exist, that's a problem relative to Jews. I would approach it like the Confederate flag and say, can you tell me why you posted this? Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Let me tell you, it may be heard reasonably differently. Can you post something like solidarity with the Palestinian people? We need to talk more and attack less. And I believe on some of these, there can be middle ground. Could you terminate an employee that said globalize the intifada? Maybe, but maybe a discussion first is better. So, what are my takeaways on this one? Big picture. I know they're obvious. Address anti Semitism in your harassment training, and maybe don't include only the most clear examples. I just did a training program and I dealt with a three-headed monster of anti Semitism in 1 minute. The three heads are anti faith, anti people, nexus to Israel. And I gave one example for each in 1 minute. Doesn't need to take over, supplant, replace other issues, which are very important, but it needs to be there. What I can tell you is, I've often heard, I've heard women say, well, you don't know what, to me, you don't necessarily know what we talk about when the guys are not around. Or I've had friends who are Black who say, you don't also necessarily know what we say in our circle. Or folks who are gay who say, you got the message. I need to tell you that as a Jewish guy, I talk to lots of people who will often say to me, because of the work I do in this area, we had harassment training and there wasn't any reference, not even a nod to anti-Semitism. The training leaves people left uncomfortable and unfulfilled. And it's not only Jewish people. Um, I want to talk about corrective action and just make sure that some of this is in social media, that your social media policy covers harassment and vice versa. Don't wait until things reach the level of unlawful, severe, pervasive. Respond to harassing conduct, even if not unlawful. Same EO standard, not more, not less, should be prompt and proportionate. And I need to just say, this is my observation, sometimes the corrective action is light, particularly with things in the Middle East because of free speech concerns. They're not raised relative to other types of harassment. First Amendment doesn't apply to private employers, putting public aside. If someone makes a generalization about Jews in general or Israeli Jews in particular, that's harassing, stereotyping, unacceptable speech. I find it a bit ironic, I'm being pretty open today, that some who have censored a lot of speech call for free speech when it comes to anti-Semitism. I want to just also say, what is anti-Semitism? You have to look, at least in part, subject to reasonableness of those who are experiencing it. When I want to know what is a disability, I listen to disability advocates. In order for me to learn what is the kind of bias against Christians that has resulted in, I believe, the need for an executive order to eradicate that bias, I talk with Christians. I do more than just talk, I listen. The same thing with race, the same thing with ethnicity. Jews do not get to define what anti Semitism is fully. But one of the things that, and I don't think we're unique in experiencing it, I'm sure women have been told that's not sexism. I'm sure men have been told, I mean, I'm sure blacks have been told that's not racism. I will tell you, I've had people explain to me why things are not anti Semitism in terms that were of concern. I talked about the ADL just real quickly, the American Jewish Committee. 78% of Jews feel less safe since the attack by Hamas, and 46%, almost half, have altered their behavior. They won't wear, I wear a chai, it means life. It was my grandmother's chai. I'll wear this till I die. Just means life. Hebrew symbol for life. But people tell me sometimes cover this up when you go certain places. Um, or someone not acknowledging that they're Jewish. Not that people need to go around and talk about it, but we hear so much about having workplaces that are where people can be their authentic selves. I don't think someone has to talk about their faith or their ethnicity, including being Jewish. But if they want to, they should be comfortable. So what can you do as leaders? Number one, speak up. We already talked about that. Number two, think about if you have an inclusion program, having something on anti-Semitism, and it doesn't have to be only the oi, focus on some of the joy. Ask some people what's some of the joy of being Jewish. Have a Hanukkah party to celebrate it. Not very religious. Be thoughtful on how you condemn anti-Semitism, by the way. Be careful of the what about. Well, I condemn anti-Semitism, but what about the Middle East? You can hold two thoughts, but when you say one in conjunction with the other, it sounds like you're potentially blaming Jews for what's going on in terms of the anti-Semitism. Think about acknowledging things like Jewish American Heritage Month, Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'm not going to go into the Jewish ERG. I want to save, I'm just looking at the chat, time for a couple questions. But what I really want to end with, and I tried to include a little bit in here, and such gratitude to HR Learns and Suzanne Lucas for this opportunity, educate people a little bit that even though Jews are a minority, less than 0.02, less than not 2%, 0.02% of the world, We often are denied minority status. There's 7 million or 8 million billion people in the world. I did a program and I asked how many Jews are there. Lots thought it was more than a billion. It's about 16 million, less than 0.2%. Make clear, it's not just a religion, it's a people. Make clear, like any other people, no more, no less, a place in your workplace. Give a little history, including the Holocaust, and other examples. And then look in your workplace and know that most people want to do the right thing, I believe, notwithstanding those bad statistics from the ADL. I think most Gentiles are not anti-Semitic and want to do the right thing. Help them if you're Jewish. Trainers, if you're not, give them the tools. Suzanne, questions? I went too long. I'm sorry.
No, you could, as far as I'm concerned, you can keep going all night. Um, we don't have a lot of questions in the chat, but if anybody wants to have throw a question in now, absolutely. Let's get Jonathan to address it while he's here. Most of the comments are thank you for sharing your personal stories. This was very eye opening. You're a very compelling speaker, and I have to say I agree with all of that. I will be sending out the video and the slides to all of you. It takes a couple hours for the slides to render on, not the slides, for the video to render on Zoom, so it'll probably be tomorrow because it's bedtime where I am. Well, it's not bedtime, it's 8 p.m. I don't go to bed at 8 p.m. But anyway, I'll probably send it out tomorrow. But if you have any questions right now, throw them in the chat. Jonathan, I thought this was amazing. Just such an insightful uh, session. Thank you.
Thank you. And just spending the time together today makes me feel good knowing it's not about me, but knowing how many people care about the issue. And Suzanne, thank you for your allyship and your voice generally on social media. Love
Thank you.
the breath of fresh air, respect, and rationale that comes from what you post.
Oh, you're now my favorite. You're my favorite person now. Thank
Oh,
you. So, with that, since I don't see any questions, I think we can go ahead and end. I hope that we see you all in an upcoming HR Learns webinar. We have two upcoming, one with Brenda Neckfottle on managing Gen Z. This is the second time she will have given it for HR Learns. The first time was so fabulous that I immediately scheduled a second time as soon as she was done because it was such a good thing. And then we have a completely unique webinar coming up with Albert Lowe on storytelling. Albert is a master storyteller. He's a friend of mine. He is hilarious. It's going to help you be able to explain the why and the story behind what you're recommending because we have the facts and figures to support things like employee engagement is important, blah, blah, blah. But people don't hear it without the story. So, with that, I hope to see you all again. And once again, thank you so much to Jonathan for being here
thank you.
today. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Great day, everyone. Happy holiday for those who may be celebrating next week. Peace.
Bye.